Good evening. This is another live training session from Unity Technologies. My name is Adam Buckner, one of the many screencasters that we have. The many being two, me and Matt. Matt is also in the audience as Matt Mirrorfish this evening, and he will be helping answer questions. So what are we doing tonight, or this morning, or whatever time it is for you guys? We're making a modal window. And what is a modal window? Well, it's that thing in the picture. It's a dialog box that comes up usually with a question or something, or an announcement, and then a button or more that you can select. In this case, do you like the icon? And then you can say yes or you can say no. And why are we doing this? Well, if you think about it from the outset, especially with the new UI tools, we could create a new window each time, have one built for every possible question that you could ask, and then have those buttons hard-coded so that that button does one thing, the thing that you want it to do. But that seems kind of silly. What we need is a generic window, just a single window that we can lay out in the broadest fashion, that we can pop up when we need to, and we can send the information and the events that we want to track and listen to that window, and have that window respond dynamically, regardless of what information we send to it. And so also today we're going to be looking at, which is sort of the backbone of what's going on here, are Unity events and Unity actions. So let's come on in and take a look at Unity. A partially pre-created scene we've got going on here, not much here. Get out of 2D mode. I have a little background and a camera pointing at it and a spotlight. And that's just to give us something behind what we're making today. And I'm going to go back into 2D mode. Just a little rock texture that I found in my library. So a simple scene, and we have some very simple prefabs that we're going to use for background stuff, but pretty much we're going to build everything that we need to here in this session. A little bit of a warning, this is a very fiddly subject. The subject itself is relatively simple, but getting it to work is going to be a tiny bit fiddly, so we're going to be popping around doing lots of little code, and some blunt force coding that you'll see in a moment. So just hang on to your hats and we'll see what we can do with that. So we've got these buttons, let's just sort of create, actually, do I want to create a button now? Yeah, we will. We'll go ahead and make up our canvas and some other stuff. So let's go ahead and throw on a button. So this is new UI tools, and it's going to create our canvas for us. It's also going to create our event system, and there's our generic button. Let's zoom in on that. And our button is going to have an on-click event, so that whenever we click the button, it's going to call a function. And when we do that, we usually create a new function in the functions list. We find a game object that contains the component or a script of the function to call, and we go ahead and route this through. And I'm expecting you guys to know the details of this. It is an intermediate class, so I'm not going to go deeply into stuff that we've covered in other classes. But how are we going to hook this up generically? Well, it's the button's on-click event, this on-click event that we want to listen to. We want to listen for this event. We want to wait and listen for this event to happen. And when this event happens, we want the listener, the thing that's listening for this event to happen, to invoke a function or list of functions that have been added to them, that have been added to those listeners. And so that's how we have these Unity events and these Unity actions. An action is essentially a function pointer that will point to any particular function that we want and invoke it when that event is triggered. And so we've got some Unity events. The Unity events that we're going to be dealing with today are the built-in events, the on-click event on the button, and the Unity actions we are going to describe in our scripts. So let's go ahead and just jump in and get started. Let's build a modal panel. So I'm going to get rid of this button for a second. We're going to keep the canvas, and we're going to keep the event system. Let's just bring up our canvas. There we go. Fit the screen. And then I'm going to create a panel. And someone was mentioning in chat that one of the easiest ways to block out clicks past that modal window is to put up a panel that fills the screen. And yes, that's what we're going to do. We're going to fill the screen with a panel that's going to capture all of the extra clicks so that we can't click on anything underneath this panel that's on top. So let's go ahead and create a new UI panel. And that new UI panel is going to automatically stretch to fit our canvas, which is what we want. And I'm going to see what size we've got our game. Good. I've just got the game just at a generic 1024 by 768. And we'll leave it at that for our canvas size. So we want that panel at full stretch. It's going to, that's the default size and shape for that panel. It's going to stretch and fit the entire background. And for that background, let's go ahead and give it just a very faint gray, like a 51 is what I picked. It was kind of neat, all the way down, and then alpha at about half. And so now what we've done is we've put a slightly gray tint in front of our game. And if we come back to the game view, we can see if we toggle this panel on and off, we've sort of dimmed it down, a little gray panel that's going to go over our background. And then in that, we are going to put our modal dialog panel. And this will be the window that pops up that we want to put our material in. So let's, inside this panel, let's call this our modal panel, just so we can keep track of it. And inside our modal panel, let's put in another UI panel. And let's call this one our modal dialog. If I can spell it, panel, there's an O in there, dialog panel. Good evening, folks. How are you? And we're going to make this a little bit smaller. I mean, I could grab, if you hold down Shift and that's not the Shift key, that's the Control key. If you hold down the Shift key, we can sort of grab and make this the size, whatever size we want to visually. Let's hold down the other Shift key. I keep getting the rotate. Come on, don't do that. There we go. Shift. Wonderful. Let's not do it. Let's just go ahead and do this by the numbers. So I'm going to go in and I want to just have this centered. Let's just center that. And that's the option click to throw that in the center. And then I also held down Shift to set the pivot, which was already set to the center. And then I'm going to make this panel in numbers. I'm going to make it 360 magic numbers. Should make a pretty good panel, but that's looking thinner than I want it to be. We may go ahead and adjust that as it comes along. And we've got our image, and I've got a little parchment here that I'm going to throw up there, and that's going to be my little parchment image. I'm thinking I want to make that a little bit taller. Let me zoom in a little bit. Not as big. I thought I'd written down my magic numbers to make it quick and simple when we went, but I don't like that. We'll see how it goes. We might adjust that as the case may be. And so that's our modal dialog panel background. And then let's prop up our alpha on that image, because a lot of these images come in very modern and chic like there with a slightly transparent. So let's go ahead and make that a solid window. So there we've got our canvas, which is our root UI item. We've got a fully fitting modal panel that's slightly gray, and then on top of it is our dialog panel with our little parchment paper that we have on top. When we do this, we want to have we want to put some material inside. And one thing that's really nice about the way that the UI tools work is that when we use content fitters, and this is going to be the basis of how this works quite dynamically, is that we can put down content fitters for our dialog panel, and then put our content inside that fitter, and then it will be adjusted on the fly. So I want to break this panel up into two sub-panels. I want to make it another UI panel, and let's call this one the question panel. And this will be where we ask our question. And let's make this one centered as well. So we've got that centered on the parent, and then let's bring it in a little bit smaller. Let's bring it in and make it 340. And then we'll see if my magic numbers were gonna work or not. And then my question panel here saying it wants to be 80 on the top for our width and our height. And then let me anchor this to the top, actually. So we can pop that up to the top. And then let's just drop it down a little bit off the top. This is just so that we can keep it a little bit nice and even. So let's let me also pop the pivot up as well. So I'm gonna pop both the, holding on the Shift key for the pivot, and then the anchor on the top, please. So that'll pop it up there. And that's because my position Y is going to be based on my pivot. So let's just bring that back down about 15 units. And so that's just going to be slightly off the top there, and see how that works. And then for the image, let's get rid of that background. Let's have none, because this panel we don't want to see. And so let's give it none. And also let's take that alpha channel and drop that down to 0. So we have a panel, but it's completely invisible. And this will be for holding our content. So the content, we want to put on this content a layout element. So let me clear that out. And let's go to layout. And just as an aside, don't forget that when you're doing UI stuff, there are UI things in the UI, which is our buttons and our masks. You will also find UI related things in layout, because these help us do layouts, and they're in their own category. They're not in the UI, they're in the layout. And so what we're looking for here is our horizontal layout group. And so this will group things in a horizontal fashion. And again, some magic numbers. I want some space between my items. So let's go ahead and I found that 7 worked pretty well. And I want my items to align in the upper left. Leave that at default in upper left. And I do not want to force expand my children for this particular one. Now, inside this particular horizontal layout group, I want to add 2 things. I want to add an optional icon holder and my pretty much required question text box, because this is the question that we're going to be asking with the modal window. So first thing first, let's make a UI image. And that will be for the image that we want. I have my content fitter running. Let me just turn that off, because I need something on my image to be able to see it. The image is none on this. We won't see this image until I put another layout element on it. And we also want our alpha at 100%, which we have. Thank you. And then let's go ahead and add our component, which is going to be our layout element. And in our layout element, we want this to be 64 by 64. So let's go ahead and make a min width of 64 and a preferred width of 64 as well. So this will be what pops out our item when we have that. So let's put that horizontal fitter back on. So there we've got our icon holder, and we'll deal with its alignment in a moment. It's not looking very pretty right now. And then we also want to get into our text. So let's make a UI text. So this UI text also needs a layout element on it. Come on, you can do it. Let's get a layout element. So let's add our typeface calligraphica, and let's make this a little bigger so it's slightly more readable. How about only 18? There we go. And line spacing 1, rich text. Let's make this alignment in the upper left. That looks good. Let's add a shadow to make it slightly easier to read. I'm just going to type that in, shadow. And our shadow, let's just put this at 1, 1. And let's make the shadow white, believe it or not. No, let's leave the alpha at 50. And then let's make this white. And so that's just because we've got black text. This is going to look like a little bit of a highlight on the text when you see this at full scale. Now, the question text, let's put in something that's a placeholder for us to understand. And let's just call this question text. And then a little note, which is, if you see this, there has been an error. And the reason for this is we're going to replace this text when we call our modal window. We're going to be able to send information to all of the boxes that we're making. Notice how, as we deactivate that image, I make it inactive. You can see how that text fits over to the left-hand side. I think we want to get a little bit more breathing room off of our question panel. Let's make that a little bit smaller, like at 320. That gives us a tiny bit of breathing room there. And then as that image comes back and forth. So this we'll see this when we're working on our script, is we're going to be activating and deactivating elements inside these UI panels. So that's our question panel. So at that modal dialog level, let's go ahead and make another UI panel. And again, this is going to be very similar to the question text. This is going to be our button panel. So let's go ahead and name this our button panel. And that's our button panel. And also, very similarly, let's align this to the bottom using, I also want to move my pivot, so I'm just holding the Shift and the Alt, and then moving that down using the anchor presets. And then the size, let's make this 340 by, my magic number say 60. But we'll see how that works. This is maybe we do need to go back down to that other size. This is looking a bit big. So what was my magic number for that? That looked too small. 80. A 160 on the parent. There we go. Let's bring this down to 160 again. So maybe I just have to trust my magic numbers. There we go. That's looking good. And again, we want to remove that alpha all the way down to nothing. And then we don't need a reference to any source image because we want this to be empty. And we want to lift it up off the bottom. So again, let's lift that up. Let's make it an even 15 there. Let's see if we're going to bump into our question panel there. No, that looks about right. Cool. So that's going to be the home for our buttons. But this button panel is also going to need that horizontal layout. So let's go ahead and I'm going to type in horizontal layout if I can spell it. So there's my horizontal layout item. And the way I want to set this up, again, a little bit of magic numbers, is I want some spacing. So let's get that 7 units of space in there. Let's align this to middle. And you'll see that this will help us when we're adjusting for multiple buttons, that we want to have that for that middle center. And then I do want to have child force expand, width, and height. Now let's put in a button inside this. So that's our button panel. So let's go ahead and create one single UI button. So there's a nice big button. So let's go ahead and make some quick changes to that. Let's change our image to header. Makes it a little a button that looks similar to our background. And then we can leave pretty much all of this the way it is. We can, on white, we can up the alpha a little bit. We might want to make that background pure white. So we're looking at our image, even though it's slightly transparent. If we really want to, you can just get rid of the transparency altogether. Now, this particular image is sliced, and we want a sliced image, with 9 sliced image, so those borders stretch appropriately for the fact that we are going to be resizing this particular button. So let's go ahead and make a prefab out of this. So let's go ahead and grab that into our prefabs folder. So we have our button. So that's our button prefab that we have there. We'll just leave that called button. And then this particular one, let's call this the yes button for this instance. And let's take that text, which is supposed to be generic button, let's make it yes. Also, let's update our, oops, not 180, 18 should probably be fine. See how that is? We can adjust that as we need to as we go. So we have this button that now says yes. And so let's go ahead and duplicate this. And notice that that horizontal layout group has now given us some, has spaced both of these buttons. So I can now change this one to the no button. Bring up that text and make this no. And then let's duplicate it again. And let's call this the cancel button. And then change our text there to cancel. So now we have pretty much the base content of what we need inside our modal dialog box. I'm going to, what do we shrink this to? We shrank that to 320 by 80, and this is 340. So let's bring that one down to 320 as well. So that just gives it a little bit of a border. So now we have our 3 buttons. We have our placeholder text, and we have our placeholder for the icon graphic. And as we've seen, if we turn these items on and off, the other items go ahead and adjust. So if we want to make a simple generic announcement that just says OK or cancel, once you've described it, all we need to do is turn on that one single button when we send information to that modal dialog. I'm going to quickly do one other set of buttons, and this is for testing. So we're going to make some buttons that can test this modal dialog, and I'm going to do that by creating a new UI panel. And again, remember that's going to fill our canvas. So let me go ahead and change my pivot and my position by holding down the Shift and the Option key to the upper left. And then let's go ahead and make the size of this 160 by 160. We're going to only worry about the width. The height's kind of irrelevant because we're going to be using another layout script on that. And then let's pull it off that corner by just a tiny bit so that it looks a little nicer. So let's just pull it off by 20 pixels over and 20 pixels down. So it's just sort of off that edge. Add a vertical layout group. So we're making a vertical layout group. And we're going to leave this one at all zeros. And I want this to be upper center because we want to have buttons inside that are going to be centered on this element, but in the upper center of this element. So that's where it's going to come from. And let's go ahead and drag one of these buttons into it, into our panel. And let's just call this our test panel. That's our test panel. Doesn't need to be caps, but heck, why not? Now, our button can also have a layout element. And when we have our layout element, we can say things like our minimum width, I don't know what would be good, 60. And our preferred, or minimum, not width, sorry, I want minimum height, let's say 60. And our preferred height is 60 as well. You should be 60. Okay, that's what I get for not taking down all of my notes before doing this properly. I may go and quickly fix that in a second, but let's move on because I don't want to get stuck in laying out the UI. So essentially we will have a bunch of buttons here that we can use for testing things, but we will get to that in a moment. So now what we need to do is write the scripts that are going to drive this UI system that we have quickly set up. And then I will come up with the proper content fitter for that, but I don't want to stop for that just now. So scripts. I have one script that we'll get to in a second called Display Manager, and this is just so that we can display some text on the screen and is not really part of what we're learning today. We'll have a quick look at that, a quick peek at that when the time comes. But let's go ahead and make some new scripts. The first one is going to be incredibly simple. So let's create a C# script. And that C# script is going to be called bring, and no thanks, all caps, bring to front. Now, the reason for this is we want this modal dialog window, this modal dialog box, to be on top, at the highest level on this canvas. And because it has the wide panel, it'll also prevent us from touching anything underneath. And because of the color, it'll dim the game momentarily while we are asked our question. But because we do our sorting, our draw order is based on the order in the canvas, or one of the ways that we can do that is the order in the canvas. We need a quick script, and we'll pop this into MonoDevelop, called bring to front. And we are essentially going to say in on enable. So whenever we enable this script, what do we want to do? We want to take the transform, and we want to do something called set as last sibling. And what set at last sibling will do is make this the last child in the hierarchy for its layer, and so therefore it will draw last. It'll draw on top. That's all we need to do. So void on enable, set as last sibling. And when we come back to Unity, we can grab that and put that on the modal panel. So whenever this is activated, so if we have to enable it, this script will bring it to the front if for some reason anything else has come to the front on top of that. Now we need to get into the meat of our heavy script. This is the script that's going to be doing most of the work. We've got another script that is a bit fiddly that's going to be the testing script, which is also an important part of this. But let's write the modal panel script now. So let's create a new C# script, and let's just call this one modal panel. Modal panel, modal window, giant asparagus creature from outer space. You can name it what you want. And let's bring that into MonoDevelop. So namespaces, the first things we're going to need using, what are we using? Unity Engine.UI. So we're using our UI system, and we need to make references to texts and images and buttons. So for that, we need to use our UI namespace. We also are going to be using events. So also in the Unity engine, there is a namespace called events. It's not event systems. Sometimes you do need both events and event systems. In this case, we just need events. And for ease, I'm going to get rid of this. We don't need starts and updates. So no spare code and no, go away. Silly thing. We want to have easy access to the items that are here. Let me just center that first and then zoom in. We want to have easy access to these items. And so we've got the modal panel itself. We've got the text of the question. We've got the icon image. We've got all these buttons. For ease of manipulating these, we need a reference to them. So let's just go ahead and make these quick public variables. So we want the public text, which is our question. The question that we are asking our users to answer by clicking a button. Let's have a public image for that icon image. Two ends in an icon? I don't believe so. Let's try with just one. And then we want some buttons. So a public button. And our button is going to be the yes button. A public button called the no button. And a public button which is going to be our cancel button. I'll probably talk about this a couple of times while we're doing our session today, but we could make this even more generic and just have button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we could send the text to the label, and we could completely trick out that entire button. So those buttons are even more generic than yes, no, and cancel. They are just empty, and we could call them whatever we wanted to. But today we're going to be relatively simple and just keep it as a yes, no, and cancel for the simplicity of today's session. We also need a public game object, and that game object is going to be our modal panel object. We need to have easy access to this script. We cover this particular thing I'm about to copy and paste in other classes. I'll quickly walk you through this. This is a modified singleton-style static reference, where we take a static reference to this particular modal panel, and then we can ask for an instance, and if we haven't assigned the instance, we find it in the game, and there has to be at least one, and we return it. I'm not going to go into the details of this. We cover this in other sessions, but this will allow us, by simply calling modalpanel.instance, we will get a reference to this particular script. And there should be only one up to us. This doesn't delete the script automatically, so we have to make sure we only have one. So now I'm going to write a very basic, how am I going to explain it? A very basic function that is going to use these events and use the buttons on click use the buttons on click event. So let's just walk through this. What I'm going to do, this is going to be a yes, no, cancel function, really. And it's going to take a string. It's going to take a yes event. It's going to take a no event and a cancel event. That's what this function is going to do. And we're going to write it as public void. And I couldn't come up with a good name. Choice. What choice you can make? I mean, you could come up with, again, all sorts of names for this. Choice is what I picked up. The parameter list is going to include the string, which is our question. whatever that question happens to be generically, and a Unity action. Remember our Unity action? So this is a pointer to a function, and this is our yes event. The reason we need to do this is we don't know what buttons our users are going to push. So we need to bring in a Unity action, a pointer to the action for every possible event that we have buttons for. So a yes event, a no event, and then a cancel event. So this is sort of minimally what we need for the dialog box that we've set up as it exists. So we have a question to ask somebody something. We have the result when that event is triggered, the yes event. So we know what will happen if they click yes, what will happen if they click no, and what will happen if they click cancel. And we need to set these up. And these need to be attached, essentially, to the button. So let's take a look at our button. So we've got a yes button, and our yes button has this on-click event here. The no button has its on-click event, and the cancel button has its on-click event. So they all have their own on-click events. We could, essentially adding our own function pointers, if you remember, we could do this by hand in the editor, but then there's no dynamic ability to change that. So in script, we are saying, let's take our yes button and let's take its on-click event. And you can find that by looking at button and on-click. Remember that command single quote or control single quote on Windows will bring up our documentation. And so if you look at UI button, they have the on-click event, the button clicked event. And so that's what we're doing. This is the Unity event to be fired when the button is pressed. So that's what we're hooking into, UI button.onClick. And so that onClick event, what do we want to do with it? Well, first, we might be listening to something, and we don't want it. We want to have full control over this particular button. So let's remove all listeners. So if there's anything, especially for reusing this window, we don't want to call something from the last time we used it. So we have yes button on click remove all listeners, and that's a function. So we need the parentheses. And now we need to set up our listeners, what we want it to do. So that's the yes button and yes button.onClick again. What we want to do is add a listener, and the listener we want to add is, first one is our yes event. So, oops, come back here. Yes event, please. Thank you. But what else do we want to do? When we're done with this, we want to be able to close the panel. So we click it, that'll click the event. But one of the other things we need to do is we need to close the panel when we're done. So how do I call that? Well, I need a function to call. So let's go ahead and write one. So let's do something called void close panel. And the panel we're going to close is our Modalpanel object, which we're going to have our reference to up above. Set that in the inspector. And we want it to set its active to false. So modalpanel.setActiveFalse is our close panel. So that is another function, and we can add that as another listener. So we can add as many events as we have that we can get a proper reference to, that we can get a hold of. So that yes button dot on click. So that yes button dot on click dot add listener, we want to add our close panel. Close panel. Thank you. So that's what we're doing. We're adding a listener, and the listener, when it is triggered, will call the event that we stick in the parentheses. So when that on-click button happens, when the user clicks that button, we're going to call the yes event that we've sent it, whatever that generic yes event is, and the close panel. This is a little brute force you're going to see. Oh, and also speaking, we close the panel, right? So what do we have to do at the very first thing? We have to open it up. So let's take our Modalpanel object, and let's set its active to true. So when this choice comes in, the very first thing we do is we turn on that Modalpanel, we set it active to be true. Then we set the yes button. How do we set the other buttons? Well, pretty much the same way. I'm going to just quickly muscle through this. We want to set our no button, and we want to remove all listeners on the no button, and we want to set that also to the no event, because remember we have the yes event coming in, the no event coming in, and the cancel event. So we need to do the same thing here with our yes button, our no button, and our cancel button. So we can also copy that one if we're making sure that we have the right spelling. And then we want to assign our cancel event. And you can see that we're leaving the close panel the same because we always want to close our panel and we always want to remove all listeners. So that is setting up the way that the events work. And then now we also need to set up our modal panel object. So we take our question, because remember we have our question up here. So we have a reference to that question. So this question.text, our text elements text field, is going to be equal to the question that we have brought in to our parameter list as an argument. So then we set our question text to being question. And then we also do things like our icon image. It's game object. We don't have an icon image to this right now. This one is only the yes, no question and the text. So we want to set its active to false. And we're going to need to do this for everything that we've got in that window. We need to do this. We need to set either false or true for the image, for the text, and the 3 buttons. So when we're doing that, we also want to take our yes button dot game object dot set active is true because we want a yes button, and then our no button dot game object dot set active is also true, and our cancel button dot game object dot set active is true. So if we're looking down that list, we want to make sure that our icon is off, our 3 buttons are on, and we don't have to worry about the question text, because in this particular style of way that we're working, that text is always going to be on in every instance. So let's save this. So this is the very basis of what this particular modal window is going to do. And we now need to test it. And so we're going to need a tester. So let's create a new C# script. And we're going to call this one test modal panel, test modal window, something like that. Tester. Let's call this test modal window. So there's our test modal window, and let's open that up and monodevelop. Now this is a little bit, again, fiddly because we need to do some testing. So bear with me a little bit as we build this up. The first thing we're going to need to do is, again, are using Unity Engine UI, because we've got that UI working, and using Unity Engine events, because the same situation as the other script. We're touching on UI elements and we're touching on event elements, so we need to make sure we've got those namespaces loaded. We need a reference to the modal panel, and it's private because we will get it from that static reference that we've got. So there's our private reference to the modal panel. And then in Awake, we need to set some of this stuff up. Our modal panel, our private reference to the modal panel, is going to equal our modalpanel.instance. And again, I hate to say it, refer to some of the other videos that we've done on communicating between scripts and game objects, and you'll see how that works. So there's our reference. So essentially, we now have a reference to that modal panel script that we've just written. And then what we want to do is we want to send to the modal panel to set up the buttons and functions to call. And how are we going to do that? let's write some test functions that we can call. So just so you know, as a note, these are going to be wrapped up. They're all going to be wrapped into Unity actions. So that we'll wrap those up into a Unity action. And so let's make a void test yes function. So essentially what happens when we say yes? This is where that display manager is going to come in. We have this script. Again, we're going to pretty much ignore it. This script, which is a display manager, is simply going to put text in a text object so that we can see that something has happened. And then after a while, and then part of a coroutine, it's going to fade out that alpha and it's going to disappear. And this will just give us some feedback other than just throwing something into the debug log, which is hard to see on a class. But I'll include this script. It's not really fit for production, but it's someplace for you to get started in looking on how you can do it. And also note that it also has its own static reference that it has here. But it might be worth looking at offline when we're done with this class. So let's go back to our test function. And our test function is going to talk to the display manager. We need a local one. We need another local instance of this. So another private display manager. Let's just call this our display manager. And awake will do the same thing, where we get our display manager, and it's going to be equal to our capitalized class display manager. Let's get our code completion there. Instance. And then in our function, when we do a successful yes, we're going to say to our display manager to display a message. And that message is going to be, what are we going to say? Heck yeah. How about heck yeah? I love that. Yep. I'll take it. Heck yeah. How about yep? Something appropriate, right? And for no, void test no function. We're going to ask the display manager to display a message, and it's going to be no way. No, better yet, no way, Jose. And then cancel will be our test cancel function. Our test cancel function is going to be another asking our display manager to display a message, and that's going to be, I give up. I give up. I don't want to do this anymore. I give up. So those are our functions that we can call. We're going to wrap those up. Now we have to wrap these up and send them to that modal window. So when that button is clicked, depending on which one we click, will depend which one of these functions gets called. So let's send to the modal panel window to set up the buttons and functions in the function call. So we need references to these. Little private references. So we need to create these. A private Unity action. So there's our Unity action. And we're going to have my yes. It's really my yes action rather than event. You can make this event. Either would be right. I've gone back and forth whether I call these my yes action or my yes event. You can do it either way. Private Unity action. My no action. Oops. Code completion, please. My no action. And a private Unity action. My cancel action. And with these declared in awake, we can set them. So my yes action. You see, I told you this is a bit fiddly, but it all makes sense when you see it. My yes action is going to be equal to, what do we think? How about a new Unity action? And the new Unity action that we are wrapping up is going to be our test yes function. Only if I can get my proper code completion going there. Test yes function. So we have this function there at the bottom of the script, and we put that into a Unity action with a new Unity action test yes function. So we'll do this for all of ours. My no action is going to also equal a new Unity action. A new UI vertex. That's cool. I don't think that will work. Called my test no function. And then my cancel action is going to be equal to a new Unity action, which will be our test cancel function. So we have a reference to them at the top. We declare them. We then assign them, but we have to have a function to assign them to. And then we send them with public, and that's public, take notice, public void. Let's call this test our yes, no, cancel, because we're testing yes, no, and cancel. And this is a function, and we will attach this to our test button. I could think of a couple of different ways we could test this, but I thought it'd be just easiest to just show it as part of a button. And what are we going to do? We're going to talk to our modal panel. Remember, that's our reference we have here to our modal panel script, which will be instantiated in our scene. And we're going to say modal panel dot choice. And we're going to send as our modal panel choice. The first thing we want is a string. What is it? Yes, no, or cancel. Would you like to play a game? Now, would you like a poke in the eye? Now get this, /n. We'll talk, the other way, \n. We'll talk about that in a second. That's an escaped character. How about with a sharp stick? I'm in a good mood today, aren't I? So that's our string. And then we need our events. So that's essentially my yes event or my yes action. We need our Unity action. So that's my yes action, my no action, and my cancel action. So you can see now the very basics of what we've got going on here. So we have a function, test yes, no, cancel, that will send to our modal panel that choice. It'll send it a string, and it will send us 3 actions. Those 3 actions are the 3 actions that we have defined here at the bottom of the script. So let's come back to Unity, and I want to create a new game object, a new empty game object. And let's call this one managers. So we'll put our manager script. I'm going to stick it up here, up on top with the main camera. Make sure it's reset. I like to have all my stuff reset to 0 if there's no reason not to. And then let's add our modal panel script. So there's our modal panel script. We're going to populate that with our question and our icon image and our yes button and our no button and our cancel button. And finally, with that modal panel object. And remember, that's the root, not the modal dialog panel, but the one that's sitting in that covers the whole screen. And then let's add our display manager, which is going to be doing our display for us. No, onto the managers, please. So that goes onto the managers. And we need a quick text element here. So let's create, this is where this text is going to be displayed. A couple of magic numbers. So I'm going to stretch this along the top. So if we frame selected on that, we can see there it is stretching along the top. And this will be our display text. And let's make this a little bit more visible. 32 makes it bigger. Let's put this upper center. Wrap and truncate is good. Let's give it a color we can see. Something like bright yellow. and solid. A little goldy there. And then let's just add a shadow to pop it out. So this shadow I'm going to make with a very big offset, and that's because we are standing away from the wall behind us. And so I want the shadow to look like that shadow is being cast onto the wall along with the spotlight that we have. So we've added a little shadow text. So that should be enough to make it sort of pop out. And then let's bring it down just a bit on the Y so that it's just sort of down in our scene somewhere. 20, 25, minus 20. Let's try that, see how it goes. And then let's make the height a little bigger just so we can see our text there. And now we can populate that display image. So there's our manager. And then we've got our display text. And then just because there's a display time of 1.5 to how long to display it, and 1 is how long it'll take to fade. If you want to take a look at that, that's in that script that we've attached. So let's save this. And one of the most important things is to turn off, deactivate our modal panel, and then also our display text. We don't want to see any text in it. So I think that's going to be placed by the display text manager. So let's save that. Now, let's take a look at this button, our little testy button. So we've got our test panel button, and we have our layout element. Let's make its minimum height 40. Anyway. And that's it, force panel to do height. So it's only width. I think that's what we want to do. And that panel needs to be clear as well. So the parent, so I forgot to do that. Parent needs to come down, and then we don't need a reference to the background. So that's sort of what we want. Let's see what that's in the game. We've got our button. All right, so let's change this to our test yes, no, cancel button. And let's do that with our label as well. So let's copy that and paste that into the label. So we've got our test yes, no, cancel button. And will this work with our clip? Oh, it's a bit small. So let's bring that up to 18. Make it look kind of nice. And then can't stop. That's at that shadow. There we go. Whoops. Not up there. We want it to be, is it -1? Yeah, that's what we want, -1. So there we go. Button. So we, on the button, we need not just the layout element, we need the test modal panel. And so there's our test modal panel script. And it's all private at this point. And then our buttons on click. We need to add a new row in our on click. We want the same game object. And the function is going to be the test modal window test yes, no, cancel. So what's going to happen is we're going to click this button. This button is going to look at the test modal script and call that function. So let's save this. Let's hit play. Oh, come on. You can do it. Done something wrong. Okay, and then let's just check to make sure our references are correct. Modal panel object. Okay. This button's not clicking is what's happening. So let me just double check what I've done wrong with that button. Let me check the scene. Yeah, I mean, display text. Oh, I know what I've done. Stupid man. This is sitting on top of it, and it's taking a click. And I can put this in a canvas group and turn it off, so it accepts no input. There is ways that I can choose to make this one not accept input. So basically, I'm clicking on the text, and the text field is taking the input. So I'm just going to drop my test panel down out of the way for now. And then later, I'll go back and quickly do that. I just want to test this. Oops, we're in play mode. So let's go back into scene. Let's go back into my test panel. Let's drop this down -40, -60. That's good enough. So save that. So yes, I put a UI element in front of it, which is not particularly good for it. And then there we go. Woohoo! How about, there we go. Heck yeah. No way, Jose. And cancel. I give up. Woohoo. Let me fix the typo in that one. Would you like, how about, so quickly, that is a modal panel. It's taken me a little bit longer than I expected. No, I don't. And so you can imagine different ways to hook up those events, different ways to hook up those functions. Let me quickly see if I can fix that with that display text, because I haven't done this in a while. Well, we'll just try it. I will annotate the video if this is dead wrong, but I think that will do it, is putting a canvas group on the display text and then saying that and all of its children are not interactable and does not block raycasts. And then let's take and put our test panel back to -20. Now we've got that object right on top. Let's save and play. There we go, yeah. So that's what I should have done when I put the text up there. So we now have a modal dialog window. Now there's more to this. I may do a part 2 because I didn't get as far along as I would have liked, including how to send arguments into a parameter list. Because if you notice that what we're dealing with here is simple column and use them functions with nothing in our parameter list. But let's just pretend we had a function where you wanted to instantiate something. And your question was actually, you know, do you want to spawn this sphere? You know, and so you need a sphere to spawn, and you're calling an action that then needs to spawn something. How would you get that yes, no, cancel action? Well, we'll talk about that in the next lesson. And we'll talk about Unity actions that can take parameters and how you can shove them using lambdas into the current ones that have no parameters. So anyway, that's the future. That's it for tonight. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for this really rapid session. And sadly, we only have an hour. So we'll have to pick this up another day, and we'll do more on this. I see Tomaz asking, I get an error in the console. The name modal panel does not exist in the current context. This originates from the modal panel script. What am I doing wrong? Most likely there is a typo somewhere, or it's not declared properly. And if, say, I have this. We're going to get an error. And that's going to be, well, this one says does not exist in the current context, because I'm looking for Modalpanel. So it could be that, you know, there's modal with an A, and that's modal with an E. So there's a typo somewhere. Copy and paste it. You could have forgotten to declare it. So if you don't have the line and you're just going ahead and using it, you're going to get the same thing. Because whether it's spelt differently or just doesn't exist, same thing for Unity, which is this name modal panel, which needs to be a something, doesn't have anything that it can find. Ergaliv is asking, where can we see the full display manager script? I can pop it up now, but also I will include that with the session when we post it. It's a little bit lower in size. I just shrink it down a little bit, but maybe I can get it just bigger. No, won't work. You need to have it. There's no good in between size there. Code Edward asks, why not make the modal window as a prefab and instantiate it from a static class? You could do this from every place you like, and you don't need to add anything into the scene. Yeah, you could do that if you wanted to. There is the overhead of instantiating and destroying. You could also make a pool of one have code that says, if we haven't instantiated the modal window, instantiate the modal window, and then pool it so that it creates one on the fly as needed. Like all these classes, these are a place to start. I mean, speaking of this display manager, like I said, it's a place to start. It just faded some text for me. I doubt it's ready to go into immediate production and be on Google Play or the App Store this afternoon, but it might give you an idea of what to do with making a text manager. The same with this modal window. I wanted to show you how you could come up with this generic window, and you could push information to it, but hopefully it means that it'll take the mind off of you having to figure it out for yourself, because sometimes there are these things and you know what you want, but how to even begin to approach it's difficult. I'm seeing that the question has come up now a couple of times. Do you know a better way to prevent a non-UI element like a cube, I don't understand, to fire the click events, such as on mouse up, then checking with the event system? I mean, there are functions that exist inside Unity, which, like on mouse down, that you can do. You can just put that on a script on an object. You can also make 3D objects using the event system, and you can make essentially a 3D UI. But you can use the UI and event system. You can use the UI event system to put on things like chests or corpses or whatever, to activate loot to detect clicks. But if for some reason you don't want to use that, you can just use some of the traditional on mouse down. There's mouse overs and mouse downs that are just available from the basic API. Are you talking about the other way around, which is that if you have a UI panel that you don't want to click other items below the panel, there is something called is pointer over game object. Thank you very much. The computer knew exactly what I wanted. Not completely well documented here, but still what you can test is if the pointer in general or the pointer ID is over an object, and if it is or isn't, you can choose whether or not to process the click. And I know that we've covered that in a couple of other sessions, but I can't remember which ones offhand. But also my guess is that if you Google that, you'll be able to get some leeway. I'm coming to the forum because we've got a Unity search engine built in. This should be restricted to all things Unity. So you can start digging through, see how other people are doing it. All right, well, last questions, please. And then I'll wrap it up. I do not want to be poked in the eye with a sharp stick, please. But thank you. No way, Jose. All right, well, I'm going to go off mic. I'll stay in the chat channel for a little bit while longer. So thank you for coming. Follow us at Unity 3D. Follow us at the Ant Ranch. That's me. Follow us at Will Goldstone, who is our fearless leader. Follow us at Matt Mirafish, who is Matt Shell, who is in the audience today. And follow us at Mike Geig, who comes when he can. And other than that, come by, keep an eye out on the live training site, and I'll see you here next week. Talk to you later.